You actually are in physical danger.
What was it that made you stop?
If you make a bad decision, you will die.
I can't even get on my shed roof without being a little bit scared of how high it is.
Can you take us back to the morning where you decided to go for your free solo attempt of El Cap? You've obviously climbed it several times before with rope. Did it feel any different to you? You know, how did you feel that morning? Was it any different to a normal morning for you?
It wasn't that different. And it's not as if I woke up that morning and decided that morning. It was like I had decided 2 years ago almost when I started down this path of working on the project and working toward it. And so that morning in some ways just represented the end of this long road. And I had done a lot of things to ensure that I could be on autopilot that morning. Like I'd already packed my bag, I'd already laid out my breakfast, like my shoe, everything is out. Like the clothes I was going to wear, everything is pre-decided so that I could just wake up and make no decisions and just do what I had planned to do over the last, couple weeks. And I mean, really like my whole sort of quest, I don't know what you want to call it, but like my whole journey had like come to a head basically. I'd done all the prep, I'd ticked all the boxes, I'd done the things I had to do, and the season was getting on, so it's getting hotter. And so I kind of knew that there were only, maximum another week or two that it was possible that season, and then I have to wait till the next year, and then it's a whole thing to sort of maintain that fitness and maintain that psyche for a whole nother year.
In the film, you give it a couple of hours, I think, and you start one morning and it doesn't feel right to you, so you stop. What was it that made you stop?
Yeah, so that attempt actually was 6 months before. That was in the fall, like in late autumn. And so the conditions were entirely different in that it was much colder, but also that time of year, the sun is much lower in the sky. So the wall actually gets more sun and it gets sun earlier. So it means you have to start much earlier to avoid, anyway, it's complicated, but it just has to do with sunshade on the wall. And so it meant that I was starting in the dark and it was really quite cold. And I'd injured my ankle earlier that season. So I couldn't, and my one ankle was still quite swollen, and so my foot was swollen in the shoe, and so I couldn't really feel my foot, and it was just too cold. And basically I climbed up to a section of wall that relies on it's like the free blast labs. It's kind of a dramatic part of the film, but there are no holds on it, like no hand holds, so you're just trusting your life to balancing on the tips of your toes as you like walk across this smooth blank wall. And if you can't feel your feet, you're just like, no, like, basically I got up there and it wasn't even some drawn out decision. It was just like, no, I can't, I'm not doing this. Like, this is not right. And, yeah. And at the time it felt like a big failure. I felt like I'd climbed a couple hundred feet and then just couldn't do it and gave up. But the reality was that the springtime is a much better season for that anyway, because the way the sunshade is, you can start, basically the temperatures are higher, but you're in the shade longer. So it's like more stable conditions. It's like less of a variance in temperature. And so, climbing in the autumn just like wasn't ideal anyway, but because there was the film crew, I was like trying to make it happen, because you're just like, oh, you feel the pressure of like all these people and they're all kind of waiting for you, even though they're not actually putting pressure on you, but you just feel that, you put it on yourself really. Anyway, yeah, so I bailed.
How important do you think navigating fear is to eventual success and development in sport in your instance?
Oh, it's so important. I mean, I think that, in climbing especially, because climbing probably more than most other sports has a real visceral element of, physical fear, because you actually are in physical danger oftentimes. Whereas I think most other sports, you probably feel more psychological pressure and sort of fear of failure, fear of, whatever, the pressure, things like that. But in climbing, you are often in actual danger. Like you could die if you make the wrong decisions. And so navigating fear is one of the most important things, because there are many times when you really should be heeding your fear. Like if you're very afraid, you probably should back up your anchor, or like double check something again, or like make sure that everything's correct, because if you make a bad decision, you will die. But then because you feel fear all the time, you also have to be good at differentiating when the fear is completely unfounded and you actually are in fact safe and you can just ignore it and just carry on or sort of push past it. And I think that's one of the lessons that climbing really teaches is when to pay attention to fear and when to just completely ignore it.
We are so excited to announce that Whoop is on board as a partner of the Untapped podcast. Whoop is a wearable health and fitness coach that provides you with feedback and actionable insights into your sleep, recovery, training, stress, and overall health, and it empowers you to be the best version of yourself. I love it in particular for the sleep data that it provides. It's really accurate. So like the minute you fall asleep, it knows that you're asleep. It gives you data. It lets you know basically how hard to push yourself if you're training a lot like me. Alex is a Whoop athlete. It's perfect for him because it doesn't create a distraction when he's climbing. It doesn't ping him when he's gone a certain distance. It doesn't really have alerts unless you set an alarm. And it doesn't have a screen. So it allows him to quietly track his health and fitness without consuming his attention. If you are interested in taking control of your health and fitness so that you can excel in all aspects of your life, you have got to check out Whoop. Go to join.whoop.com/untapped to try Whoop for free for 30 days today.
This is going to be a mad question, but do you feel fear? Because as I've got older, I can't even get on my shed roof without being a little bit scared of how high it is. And then you just go and do El Cap like it's nothing. Is that fear inside you? Do you harness it in a total different way to a normal person? Do you think you must get asked all the time, like, do you have fear? Because I can't get my head around what you achieved. It's just incredible because the fear that I would have on the shed roof.
Yeah. No, so I definitely feel fear. I mean, I don't want to die. I mean, like yesterday, my friend and I set up this rappel line down this 1,000-foot, like a 300-meter cliff. And we're standing on the top of the cliff and we put in an anchor and we're kind of like, the anchor's not amazing. Or like, should we, and basically we backed it up a bunch of different ways at first because we're sort of like, let's make sure this is really safe. And you're like looking at stepping over the edge of this abyss, you're about to like jump off this cliff basically. And you're kind of like, let's make sure this anchor is really good. It's like, no, we definitely feel fear.
Right.
We're like, you can imagine the whole anchor ripping. You can imagine everything just, plummeting to your death off this cliff. And you're like, oh, that would, like, I don't want that. I feel that. But so my question to you though, is when you talk about feeling fear on the shed, I mean, in some ways, is that not a more, like, because I feel that a little bit, like as a kid, I would jump off roofs all the time and jump off the tops of things, except now, I'm almost 40 and like, one of my ankles hurts a little bit more sometimes. And like my knees are a little creakier and, it's like, I still could jump off a roof if I have to, but I really don't want to because I'm like, I just think it's going to take a toll. And so I think for what you're saying, being afraid on the shed, like maybe that's a well-justified fear because you don't want to take that impact, like the type of hit that you used to. And so Is that actually you being more afraid or is that just you being more aware of your body's limitations or whatever?
Yeah, I think body's limitations, and you definitely explained it by saying, like, as a kid, I'd climb trees and have no care in the world because I thought I was invincible.
And you largely were more invincible then. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is I fell off so many things as a kid, and you just you bounce and you don't weigh as much, you're not quite as creaky, and it's fine. And then as an adult, you're kind of like, you just don't want to take hits quite that hard.
I'd love to just know more about how you felt when you achieved what you set out to achieve. Was it a fleeting feeling? Did you have a crash afterwards? Like, was nothing very exciting to you once you got off the top of that mountain? Like, can you run me through how it felt to finally achieve what you set out to achieve?
I mean, obviously it was incredibly satisfying. I mean, I was totally happy. And the thing is that I'd been working on it with the whole film crew. So it wasn't just like me achieving the climb, which I was obviously very proud of and very happy about. But the whole crew was so relieved that the project was over and that we had a happy ending to the film and everything. And so we all sort of celebrated. We all had like a big brunch the next day and everybody's psyched. But actually, so I think I maybe had less of a come down than some athletes might after a big achievement. And part of that is because part of my psychological process for free soloing El Cap was to try not to put it on too big of a pedestal. I was trying not to make it my end all be all because I knew that, I mean, particularly with free soloing, the challenge is largely mental. Like I had climbed El Cap with a rope without falling like 10 years before. So physically I'd been capable of climbing El Cap, without a rope, without falling off for like 10 years. But it had taken 10 years to sort of overcome the mental side of it, of believing that you sort of can do it on command and, be sure that you're not going to fall off. Because obviously having the rope makes it feel a lot safer. But so, because I knew that it's largely a mental challenge, I didn't want to build it up even further in my mind as like, this is the biggest thing I've ever done. This is the most important thing. And so I kind of wanted it to feel like any other climbing challenge. And so I had, like, actually the week after I free soloed El Cap, I went to Alaska for an expedition with some friends, like something that I'd scheduled before. And that expedition was kind of training for this expedition I did later that winter to Antarctica. And so I'd kind of lined up all these other like normal climbing goals and trips and like the things that you normally work on as a professional climber. And soloing El Cap was just part of my year, you know, and that way it made it feel like it wasn't too big, even though I knew that it would be the biggest thing that I'd probably ever do. But you just don't want to continually you don't need to heap more pressure onto something that's already pretty intense.